Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Bobby Sylvester, joined by Mike Tagliere as always, and today we've got one of the top experts in the industry joining us to discuss his rankings. And you know we're getting close to fantasy football season when we start talking about experts' rankings. Our guest is Zachariason, and we're about to find out who he's much higher on than the expert consensus, who he's much lower on. JJ, hope you enjoyed your spring and all the free time because it's about to disappear.
It is. It sure is. I'm really excited for it, though.
Thanks for coming on the show, JJ. And, guys, I was reading this elaborate article on Deadspin about the new rule against leading with your head. There really hasn't been much talk about this, at least on our show. And we're looking at a 15-yard penalty every single time a running back does it. Are we vastly overlooking the impact this is going to have on fantasy football results?
So, Bobby, it's so funny because I don't even know if you know this, but when I had JJ on during the NFL draft series, he came on to talk running backs with me. And we legitimately talked about this exact topic with JJ on.
Really?
It hasn't come up since then, but I just realized that as you were saying
That's
it, I'm
funny.
like, wait a minute, JJ and I were talking about this as a way to decide, like if you're torn between Darius Geis and another finesse running back, like a Sony Michel or someone like that you might want to lean. It could be the deciding factor if you're torn between two players, right?
Yeah. I mean, because like somebody like Derrick Henry, maybe they went out and brought in a Dion Lewis because of him, because of the way that Derrick Henry runs with the ball.
What do you think about this, JJ? Do you think it's really going to impact the game? I know it's tough to say right now.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I have a hard time thinking that it's going to drastically impact things, only because I think that the backlash would be insane.
Yeah.
And that coming from the offensive side of the ball with running backs in particular. You know, I think that obviously I won't fault the NFL for moving in a direction where they're trying to protect
of course
human beings. You know, I just think that the overall backlash and not just from fans either, I'm saying from players and from teams might be a little strong. So I do want to see kind of how it looks in the preseason. And then, hopefully in the preseason, if you're drafting, let's say week 3 or week 4 of the preseason or after the preseason, then you'll have some sort of idea as to how that might impact someone like a Darius Geis.
It makes me really nervous that things are going to get all screwy. And maybe that's why, guys drop further in the draft than we expected him to. But, what it comes down to is I don't think that the referees are going to change things so quickly. I think it's going to be more gradual so the players can get used to it because they've all grown up being used to leading with their heads. Mm-hmm. It's what they were taught.
Yeah, players like Adrian Peterson and Marshawn Lynch would never survive in the NFL if they were not able to do that throughout their career.
Yeah.
I don't know how running backs could survive. I know they wanted to go towards a passing league, like it's almost like the home run ball. You can go too far in one direction, though, and I think they're going to learn that real quick. So I tend to side with JJ here in that they can't go over the top with it just because it would change the game too much.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. And hey, everyone, we're picking a winner Sunday for our signed DeAndre Hopkins jersey giveaway thanks to pristineauction.com. You can check out the jersey at fantasypros.com/contest, and all you have to do to enter is take 30 seconds to subscribe and review on iTunes, take a screenshot, send it to us at contest@fantasypros.com. While you're at it, check out Pristine Auction. You're going to be absolutely thrilled. They've got hundreds of lots that end daily, something for every sports fan, and everything is guaranteed authentic by only the most trusted sources. You're going to be shocked about just how affordable it can be, too. Just listen to some of these values I saw yesterday. Mike Ditka signed full-size helmet, $109. Eric Berry signed jersey, $49. And I wish I was paying more attention to that one because that is an incredible deal. I love Eric Berry. Anyways, y'all can go to pristineauction.com and see what they have for your cave. When you do, please be sure to let them know Fantasy Pros sent you. Pristine Auction is Pristine. All right, so like I said, we're going to get into JJ's rankings here in a second, and I'm looking forward to hearing him defend some of his positions, try to talk our listeners into and away from certain players. But before we get super serious, I wanted to play a little game. We haven't really done this preseason yet. I called the segment, Who Am I? And, I'm the host. I want to protect my winning streak over tags, so it's just going to be tags against JJ. Here's how it works. I give the clues one at a time, nice and slow until the first person shouts the correct answer about who I am. Pretty simple, right, guys?
Sounds easy enough.
All right. Okay, first player. Last season, I was a running back 1 in standard and PPR leagues.
No, that doesn't narrow it down.
I'm being drafted as the running back 30 behind Marshawn Lynch and Tevin Coleman.
It's not Alex Collins?
I just signed a 3-year deal.
Duke Johnson?
My team just drafted a quarterback in the first round. It's not Duke Johnson.
There's top 12 in both.
Man, Alex Collins would have made sense.
Yeah, Alex Collins is very close. They didn't draft a quarterback in the first round. He is on the same team as Duke Johnson.
Carlos Hyde?
Carlos Hyde. He was an RB1 in both PPR and standard leagues. He's being drafted behind Tevin Coleman. I mean, JJ, I saw you have him pretty low in your rankings. Do you think that he's really not going to start?
I have hesitation with him starting. I think, the way that I look at rankings in general is not so much just taking my projections and throwing them in my list of rankings. I want to look at guys who have sincere upside as well, and that's my fear with Carlos Hyde.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess if Nick Chubb is there, he's probably not going to be an RB1 again, but at least I think he's going to start. With that being said, I mean, I'm not drafting any of these Browns running backs. Good Duke Johnson, if anybody, but it's just such a crapshoot here. I don't know what to do.
So, Bobby, I want to build off this. Since you mentioned the Browns, it was something I wanted to talk about with JJ, because one of my favorite things to do, and this is something everybody should learn. If you have a favorite analyst and someone who's level-headed and that is willing to not be biased about their own team and talk about things. So Cleveland obviously has Todd Haley as the offensive coordinator now. JJ is he's a big Pittsburgh Steelers fan. So he follows them closer than the average team. It's just kind of like me with the Bears. I can tell you more about the Bears than I can most other teams, even though we follow the entire league. We watch those teams closer than any other team. Todd Haley coming to Cleveland. Now, I came across some stats when I was doing some player profiles, and I wanted to give you a chance to let me know the coordinator that Todd Haley is, because he's coordinated 8 different teams now, and each of those offenses have finished top 16 in passing attempts, yards, and touchdowns. The only time that he had a bad team was when he was asked to be the head coach of Kansas City. But there is an outlier here, is that he's coached Ben Roethlisberger and Kurt Warner every single time he's been a coordinator. So Can we say that Todd Haley is an exceptional play caller? Do you think he's competent, or do you think that he's just simply a product of the great quarterbacks that he's coached?
I think situationally, from a real football standpoint, Todd Haley is not a good play caller. I think, though, that he has the ability to maximize talent on his roster. And I know a lot of people will look at the way that they use Le'Veon Bell, and they'll sort of translate Todd Haley loving this RB1 or feeding an RB1, and then say, oh, therefore, Carlos Hyde or Nick Chubb, one of those guys is gonna be a star. I think that it's more so with Haley. He knows how to maximize the talent on his roster. I mean, if you have Le'Veon Bell, you're going to use Le'Veon Bell. If you have Antonio Brown, you're going to consistently use or want to use Antonio Brown. So I think a lot of coaching things in general are dictated by personnel first and foremost, but you can look at the high level trends, of course, and see, is this guy mostly pass heavy? Is he more run heavy? Yada, yada, yada. I think with Haley, though, like I said, situationally on a play by play basis, there's a lot of head scratchers as to what types of plays he's calling, and even his game plans at times going into particular games. I think a good example was the first Jacksonville game last year, where they go into it, they're running the ball fine. Everyone knows that you can utilize, or you can sort of run the football against that Jacksonville defense, and throwing to the perimeter didn't make a lot of sense. And then once that game script got out of hand, even before it got out of hand, they sort of started abandoning the run. And they started just feeding Antonio Brown and looking at the perimeter, and it didn't make that much sense. So I
had 19 targets.
Yeah, I mean, like those types of instances are where people like myself were critical about Todd Haley. But I think that overall, from a fantasy perspective, I think that that he's going to be a coordinator that can at least maximize the talent on his roster.
Yeah, and I do want to mention before we move on is that, so you mentioned Le'Veon Bell and the fact that he's had Le'Veon Bell the last few years. Here's a fun fact about Todd Haley, though. Of the 8 teams that he's coordinated, his team has never finished better than number 15 in rushing attempts, which is really odd because, you figure Tyrod Taylor, Carlos Hyde, Duke Johnson, Nick Chubb, it's like, are they going to run the ball or are they not? They have the receivers now, too. They have so much talent in this roster. It's going to turn around. Once Hugh Jackson's actually fired.
Let me ask you this question, though, because, even when Le'Veon Bell wasn't there, D'Angelo Williams got every single carry. Is this just who Todd Haley is, or was it that D'Angelo Williams is that good? Because if this is the case, they're going to pick one of these guys, Nick Chubb or Carlos Hyde, and turn them into a monster, right?
I think it's lack of alternatives.
Okay.
When Le'Veon Bell went down, D'Angelo Williams was literally the only relevant guy in the Steelers roster they could throw behind Ben Roethlisberger. So I think that
it's a good point.
Given the fact that they have a 3-headed monster, we already know that Duke Johnson's a very, very viable pass catching back. We know that Carlos Hyde is good, and we know the potential of Nick Chubb. I mean, it would seem a little bit foolish to just assume that Todd Haley goes with one singular guy.
Yeah, agree.
And I think that if we do think he goes with one singular guy, I would assume that it's just for that early down role as opposed to a true 3-down back.
Yeah. Yep, that definitely makes sense. And, I wouldn't be surprised with them being able to get out of Carlos Hyde's contract in 1 year if they just run him into the ground.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm not drafting him, but it's a really interesting scenario here. I want to talk about it a little bit. Let's go on to number 2. I am also a running back. Over the final quarter of the season, I was a top 10 fantasy running back. I led my team's backfield by over 100 snaps last season, but I'm being drafted as the number RB47.
Is it Theo Riddick?
Another running back on my team is being selected in the 3rd round again this season. Again.
Huh.
Wait, hold on a second. It's not Latavius Murray.
I play in the AFC North.
Oh, wow. Let me think.
Is
Giovanni Bernard?
Giovanni Bernard.
I was about to say it.
Yeah, Tags, you got that one. He was a top 10 fantasy running back over the last 4 games, guys.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, well, Joe Mixon got hurt, though. So they were kind of forced because they had Jeremy Hill on IR, and then they had Mixon go down with, I think it was a high ankle sprain, if I'm not mistaken. And Bernard was forced in that role. But he's a free agent after this year, too, and I think that's the reason they drafted Mark Walton. I still expect Joe Mixon to be the leader there.
I mean, I expect it as well, but if Bernard was that good, JJ, do you think that Joe Mixon is going to be like a workhorse running back? Or are they going to keep leaning on Bernard like they've done the last 4 or 5 years?
I mean, I don't mind Mixon where he's being drafted. I think that where he's being drafted is fine. They upgraded the offensive line. I think the offense in general is going to be better and be able to move the ball better than they did last year. I mean, even after the first 2 games of the season, when Bill Lazor took over, you could see a significant difference in that offense. I do think that they're going to use Mixon. Like Tag said, to me, this is Bernard's last year, and that's exactly why they got Mark Walton, a skill set that really is perfect to fill that Giovanni Bernard role.
Yeah.
So I think Bernard will still be involved in some way, but there are very few instances in the NFL where there's not at least another 2 backs that are involved in the backfield.
Are you interested whatsoever in drafting Giovanni Bernard, or does he just have no upside?
To me, I don't really see the reason. I think that the only way that he's going to be relevant is if a Joe Mixon injury occurs, and I usually don't draft based on hoping for or expecting an injury. So I don't necessarily see the upside as much just because Mixon's there.
All right, number 3. I am a wide receiver, and my quarterback has been a QB1 each of the past 3 fantasy seasons. When my team finally let me play, I responded by leading the league in receiving yards over the final 5 weeks.
Man.
My team proceeded to let our best wide receiver walk during the offseason.
Wait, is this? It's not Cooper Kupp.
I was a rookie last
Marquise
season.
Lee. Oh, you were a rookie. Was it Cooper Kupp?
Cooper Kupp?
No, it wasn't Cooper Kupp. It was the second best fantasy rookie last season, but he only started 5 games, and he led the league in receiving yards.
Corey Davis?
Not Corey Davis, no.
No, it wouldn't be Corey Davis. He was horrible last year.
He's in the AFC South, though, just like Corey Davis.
Why am I having trouble getting this?
Me too.
The wide receiver that walked is Allen Robinson.
Oh, I said Marquise Lee. Dede Westbrook.
Cole.
Oh,
Keelan Cole. Yeah, JJ got it.
Yes.
Man, he is being drafted so late, and Keelan Cole was awesome when they finally put him on the field.
He led the NFL in yards over the final 5 weeks.
Yes, he did.
Wow.
Can you believe that?
That's stupid.
He was the number 3 fantasy receiver during that time. Isn't that amazing?
That's insane.
Sorry, these ones are really hard, guys.
And the funniest part about that is that he might not even be a starting receiver. Think about it. Like, I was going through that, and outside of Marquise Lee, I think that depth chart is extremely wide open. I mean, they signed Moncrief to a $10 million deal. They drafted DJ Chark with a 2nd-round pick. God knows why.
They're not playing DJ Chark over Keelan Cole.
Why would they draft him then? As a bench receiver?
Yeah, man. I mean, why did the 49ers draft Pettis? You think he's on the bench?
Oh, I'm starting to turn around on that because I think Pettis can play more than just the slot, and I think that they can move him around with Pierre Garçon. So I'm actually starting to believe that Dante Pettis is going to start over Trent Taylor.
Cole is the wide receiver 76 right now.
I don't want him. I seriously don't want him.
I don't want really much to do with that passing attack. I mean, there's so many layers to it too, right? Not only is there an insane competition for targets, they also added Austin Seferian-Jenkins, so they actually have a pass-catching tight end.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, that they want to be a run-first team, and they probably will be one of the more run-heavy teams in the league. And last season, they ran the most plays in the league by far, and that's something that's probably naturally going to regress a bit. So I'm really not that interested in that passing attack.
I mean, Blake Bortles was a QB1 last year in the fantasy season, though. He was a top 12 quarterback again, and he was the number 2 fantasy quarterback over those last 5 weeks.
Yeah, if there's one player I'd want from there, it would be Marquise Lee. He's the one that they committed to for long term. They lost Allen Robinson, and they were willing, obviously, because Marquise Lee's contract wasn't like it was that much less than Allen Robinson, so they obviously valued Marquise Lee. He was drafted before Allen Robinson. If you go back to that draft class, them two were taken in the second round.
You're right.
So
yeah.
Marquise Lee, actually, over the last 2 years, even though he's missed, I think it's 3 or 4 games, he's in the top 30 among wide receivers and targets. So I think Marquise Lee is the one. He's being drafted right now. I think he's outside the top 50. So at his current cost, I'd take him as a bench receiver.
I think he's safe. I think Keelan Cole has more upside, and I know a lot of people are clamoring for D.D. Westbrook. I think he disappears in this offense, even though he led the team in air yards over the final half of the season.
Yeah. D.D. seems to be lost in the shuffle here.
Yeah. Okay, guys, number 4. I'm also a wide receiver, and I've been a top 12 fantasy receiver each of the past 3 seasons. I'm being drafted as a wide receiver 16, though. Of the targets returning to my team,
Larry Fitzgerald.
Yeah, you got it.
Nice.
I'm going to read the rest.
I'm going to read
the rest of the clues.
Demarius or something. But
Demarius would have been a good guess for sure.
Yeah.
Golden Tate would have been right up there too. I don't think Golden Tate's been top 12 because the touchdowns haven't been there. But here's a stat for Larry Fitzgerald. Of the targets returning to my team, I had 51% of them last season. And here's the best one of them all. I cannot believe this. My team has the 30th best quarterback rating last season, but we just upgraded to the quarterback with the best rating in the NFL over his last 16 games. Sam Bradford has the best QB rating over his last 16 games. Can you believe that?
It's insane, man.
I love the match, though, with Bradford and Fitz.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I do, too. If he stays healthy for like 3 games, I love it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But the low average depth of target with Fitz in the slot, I think could be money.
Yeah,
sure. I'm really excited about this one. I'm going to be drafted. Every single year I talk myself into drafting Larry Fitzgerald right around July, and I never even think about him until then, and then I get him in every single league.
Yeah. He's like the guy that's just not, he's never sexy to me, but he always performs. Like, I think we talked about it last year. I was like, oh, there's no way he finishes top 12, but I could see wide receiver 2, like low-end wide receiver 2 numbers, and of course he finishes I think he was top 10.
With like Drew Stanton as his quarterback.
Yeah. Larry Fitzgerald's ridiculous, man.
Yeah.
I'm sick of betting. I don't want to bet against him ever again, and I have him higher the consensus right now.
All right, last guy, and since Tags has a 2-1 lead, I'm going to say this is winner take all because we can't just end on a tie. This isn't the World Cup. We don't do that. So it's winner take all right here.
Okay.
This time, I'm a tight end. Over the second half, I was the number 4 fantasy tight end. I've been a top 15 fantasy tight end each of the past 3 seasons.
Jack Doyle?
My new quarterback has thrown for over 17,000 yards and 115 touchdowns in his past 4 full seasons. I was cut from my team this offseason.
Eric Ebron?
Yes, JJ is the winner, and Tags continues the losing streak.
I love
I'm just messing with you, Tags, right, buddy?
Oh, I know.
Because you always win, and so when I get a winning streak, man, I gotta
ride it, man.
Build it up.
Seriously, ride it.
Yeah, I mean it's 1 game right now. I think maybe 2. I don't know. It depends on how you count the episode where my audio failed. So, all right, guys, we're gonna get into JJ's rankings, the winner, in just a second. But first, I want to talk about the other sponsor of today's show, Simple Contacts. It is the most convenient way to renew your contact lens prescription and reorder your brand of contacts from anywhere in minutes. It's vision care for the 21st century. Instead of heading to the doctor every single year to renew your prescription for something you wear every day, just take a few minutes out of your day, do it on your own time and terms, and here's how it works. You take a 5-minute vision test from your phone or computer. It's all reviewed by a licensed doctor. You receive a renewed prescription and reorder your contacts. All you need is your current contacts, an internet connection, plus 10 feet of space. And if you have an unexpired prescription, just upload a photo of your doctor's info and order your lenses. Simple Contacts is super convenient and helps you save money. And here's a code for you if you want to check it out. Get $30 off your contacts at simplecontacts.com/fantasypros, or just enter FantasyPros, all one word, at checkout. Here's a disclaimer, though. This isn't a replacement for your periodic full eye health exam. Again, that's simplecontacts.com/fantasypros. So what do you guys think about Eric Ebron? I mean, I didn't realize he was so good in the second half. Why would they cut him?
I think they were showcasing him for a trade, honestly.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Honestly,
if
you guys remember by the JJ, do you remember the trade deadline? Like last year, everybody's like, "Oh, people are making calls about Eric Ebron, but they're not listening to calls." Okay.
Yeah, I think that they're in a position where they probably know offensively they're not going to utilize the tight end as much as or at least a pass catching tight end as much as they could. And really it's probably a cost benefit thing from their end. But I'm still somewhat of an Ebron truther. Just given his age, given his production thus far, I don't think he's that dead. Now I don't know if he's going to take over that tight end 1 job in Indy. I don't think anyone really does right now. But I do think that he's an interesting late round dart throw right now.
So let's say you get after like Kyle Rudolph, Delaney Walker, all the safe tight ends. If you're throwing a dart for one of these guys, are you just streaming for like the best week 1 guy, or are you trying to go like Eric Ebron, OJ Howard, and just see what happens?
Yeah, I mean, I think with tight end, there's a very clear gap in my eyes after that like tight end 12, tight end 13 spot. After you get like the Burton or the Kittle, those types of guys where you could honestly see top 5 upside in some way if things break their way. And then once you get past that range, you're looking at guys like Charles Clay, who could see a lot of volume, who I'm a little bit higher on probably than most, or a Cameron Braid or ASJ, who we mentioned, or Austin Hooper. These guys who, realistically, you probably can't see them being week in and week out starters. So you really, in my opinion, just go after, if you can't get the Kittle or the Burton types, just go after a guy who has crazy upside that you could maybe see a path to being that at least top 10 type tight end, and then pray for, hope for the best, because realistically tight end is a very unpredictable position. The only reason why you can really stream it effectively is because tight end just sucks that bad.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. So JJ, we're going to do your rankings here. And first of all, I want to mention to our listeners, we're not trying to grill him or trap him or anything like that. We're not we're not mean. Like, there's podcasts that are mean. We just want to know why he thinks what he thinks so that maybe we can change our minds and let you listeners make your decisions. So Tags, why don't you go first? What's the first ranking that sticks out to you that makes you want to know what JJ thinks here?
So when we were having JJ on, and I knew this was going to be about, I was worried that we were going to be too much in line, because JJ and we're not hot take guys. We're pretty much logical thinkers, where we don't we don't go outside of our projections too much, and it's like we understand why things happen the way they do. So the one name that really stood out to me that I had to ask you about, because I just can't see it, for Patrick Mahomes. You have him at number 10 in your quarterback rankings. Not to say I can see upside being there, but I believe by drafting him there, you'd be drafting someone towards their ceiling. I mean, the kid has started 1 game. I'm just curious on your process with Patrick Mahomes and how you got to the number 10 ranking.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So just to, throw it out there, the way that I'm ranking is not so much just taking projections and then throwing them in a rankings list. Right. I take projections, and then once I reach a certain point where I know replaceability is there, I look strictly at upside. So with someone like Mahomes, you mentioned, the upside is certainly there in some way because of ambiguity and because of the weapons that are in that offense, right? And I also think that Kansas City could end up being pretty pass heavy this year because that defense doesn't look nearly as good as it did last year. So with Mahomes, it's more so looking at the fact that, can I get a guy who could be realistically a top 5 quarterback this year? Is it probable? No, I don't think it's probable. But looking at, we know what we're getting out of someone like, more than likely out of someone like Matt Ryan or Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers is actually my favorite go-to example of why I think the way that folks look at the quarterback position is a little bit skewed, because you can look at Phillip Rivers year in and year out ranks and see that he's a QB 12 every year, he's a QB 10. He's giving you that QB 1 production, but that production in most leagues is replaceable. You can get that production through streaming. I mean, we've done it on Living the Stream the past 4 seasons. So to me, it's really just looking at that upside piece. And I know that I sent you my rankings and such, but I did look more into Matthew Stafford in particular, and I have Mahomes over Stafford right now. But I have a feeling I'm going to own a little bit more Matthew Stafford than I thought, just given he has a pretty cake early season schedule. Mm-hmm. And I think that's very, very important when looking at, especially the quarterback position, just because that you might go in to a given season and start streaming. So Stafford's a guy who I might be a little bit higher on than what the rankings show.
Hey, by the way, for our listeners, JJ can be found on Twitter at LateRoundQB. And the reason it's LateRoundQB is because JJ literally wrote the book on drafting QBs late. Mm-hmm. So the whole trend belongs to JJ.
I will say this. I'm definitely not the first person who has ever drafted a quarterback late. I tell people that I'm just the first person that marketed it heavily.
There you go.
Yeah. It's a great call, and I'm glad you made that decision. Now, the only one that I'm willing to draft in the first 70 picks is Aaron Rodgers, just because he has been a dynamo every single time that he's healthy. But yeah, I mean, you can wait. I see you've got Matt Ryan as your number 12 quarterback, and I totally agree. I think he's a top 12 quarterback, but you can wait and you can get Matt Ryan in the very last round. He's going undrafted in most leagues.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy there. Bobby, I thought you were going to ask. I'll ask it because I know Bobby's dying to, because he's going to put Andrew Luck in his top 5. So JJ has Andrew Luck at number 16.
He's just being safe, man. I wasn't going to ask him about Andrew Luck.
You're going to ask.
I totally get that.
We're going to ask because Bobby told me the other day if Luck's healthy, he's going to draft him as the number 2 quarterback.
No, I did not say that. I said he would be the number 2 quarterback in my league if I knew he was completely the same.
Right.
There's a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, I'm ranking him where I'm ranking him just based on what we know right now. That's really what it comes down to. I mean, obviously, a guy like Luck to me would be if he continues and is drafted as a late-ish round guy, I think he's a perfect target just because, like I said, I'm looking strictly for the guy who can actually be a week-to-week difference maker at a position that's replaceable, and we've seen him do that in the past. You know,
and his VBD, if he is normal, is going to be, Andrew Luck normal at least. He's going to be 100 to 150. That's a top 12 fantasy player. And I understand when you apply streaming to that, it throws VBD off a little bit, but I mean, it's still somebody who can help you quite a bit, and especially if you get him later. So let's just say this, JJ. He gets really healthy. He's throwing normal-sized footballs instead of, whatever it is, Nerf balls or whatever. And he looks good. He says there's no pain. Where are you drafting him if you're drafting final week of the preseason?
Yeah, I mean, I think that he's an easy top 10 quarterback then.
Okay.
I would put him in that. I have a tier of Carson Wentz, Roethlisberger, and Kirk Cousins. I think that he'd firmly be in that tier.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
that's fair.
Sounds good. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at your rankings. I don't really see anything that's too funky. I didn't expect to. Your rankings are always right on the money. Tom Brady at number 2 makes me a little bit nervous because he was so bad to end the season. Are you concerned about that whatsoever?
Not especially. I would say though that realistically, I could make an argument that Aaron Rodgers is in his own tier.
Mm-hmm. Agree.
1, and then I had a lot of trouble from 2 to 15 essentially. I mean,
yes.
I don't have, I'm not on the Deshaun Watson bandwagon in terms of him being this crazy difference maker in fantasy. I like Deshaun Watson as a potential star quarterback in the league, but there's so much regression that's going to hit that offense in that passing attack. Although I will say they have a decent early season schedule too, so that's going to be annoying to push off the mentions whenever Deshaun Watson goes nuts. But yeah, I mean, that's why, I have Deshaun Watson 3, for instance, but I'm really high on someone like Drew Brees. I could easily see a scenario where Drew Brees, I actually favor him over someone like Deshaun Watson.
That's great, man. Yeah, I've got Drew Brees over Deshaun Watson, and people told me to go die because of that. So, you know how it is. I've got Deshaun Watson as my number 8 quarterback. I'm standing by that. You guys come talk to me at the end of the season, all right? All right, let's move on to running back because I don't think anyone that's listening to our show is really going to be drafting a quarterback that high, hopefully at least. The one player I wanted to talk about is Dalvin Cook.
Mm-hmm.
I can totally see this. I mean, he was a complete workhorse, but coming off the big surgery, you've got him as your number 7 running back over Leonard Fournette, Kareem Hunt, Melvin Gordon. Can you talk to us a little bit about what went into that decision?
Yeah, so, I base, like I said, my process through looking at player evaluation, I'll go with projections and look at my projections and they'll spit something out, and then I'll adjust from there because I don't think that projections tell us, everything about it, about upside and downside with a player. LaShawn McCoy is a good example of that. But with Dalvin Cook, he came out looking really nice, and I think that it's kind of easy to see why. If you are a believer in Kirk Cousins in that Minnesota offense, they should score points. Dalvin Cook has that backfield mostly to himself. I know Latavius Murray is there as well. But you look at the way that they used him before that injury, he was a workhorse back. And to me, I'm associating Dalvin Cook with a great offense and hoping, that the ACL recovery is looking good. And these days I am far less concerned about ACL recoveries than I used to be.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And, he was a real 3-down back too. They had Jerick McKinnon and didn't even use him until Dalvin Cook got hurt.
Right.
Tags, what do you think about this one, man? Does Does the injury concern you whatsoever? Or do you think he bounces right back? I mean, they're not going to stack the box against Dalvin Cook. They're definitely stacking the box against Leonard Fournette.
Yeah, no, I did a draft. I can't remember what, we do so many mock drafts for like different outlets in the offseason. I forget which one it was. It might have been a 2-quarterback one, but they asked me a question in the follow-up because they had some follow-ups for it for their magazine or whatever. And I drafted 3 players coming off torn ACL, and they're like, "Did you purposely do this?" I was like, "No, I legitimately, I'm with JJ here, as I do not factor torn ACLs into my thought process anymore. Like, if you're trying to decide between 2 players, yeah, if you want to lean against the player who had a torn ACL, but modern medicine is so different. A lot of players come back the same player, if not better, even at advanced ages like Adrian Peterson. Like, it's just ridiculous what some of these guys can do. With that being said, I have no issue with it. Dalvin Cook has actually the easiest schedule in the NFL in the way that I did it. So it's not basing it off just last year's overall numbers. Like, it's a whole process I did, but Dalvin Cook's schedule is phenomenal. I don't think I could take him over Fournette, but I could definitely see the case of taking him over guys like Kareem Hunt and Melvin Gordon.
Yeah, I can make the argument too for Fournette over Cook. I think that they're super, super close.
Yeah.
All right, Tags, who's your next guy, man?
All right, the one you already hit on it a little bit here. You said LaShawn McCoy, and he's someone that you're lower on. You have him down at 13, and I had him at 14 for a little while, and then I was like, it's probably too low. We have a 30-year-old running back here playing behind an offensive line that just lost 3 starting offensive linemen, playing with a quarterback that is going to be one, it doesn't really matter who, A.J. McCarron, Nathan Peterman, or Josh Allen. No receivers, no other threats in this team. There's some legitimate concern about LaShawn McCoy, but how far do we let him drop in the rankings because of that? Like, if you're on the board and you're sitting there staring at LaShawn McCoy and someone like Devonta Freeman, who's in somewhat of a timeshare, Joe Mixon even, in that conversation, who would you go with, JJ?
Yeah, so I think that the way that I'm approaching LaShawn McCoy and sort of, I think it goes to your strategy and how you're handling the early rounds. If you go with a running back heavy approach, that's when I would go with LaShawn McCoy, because you're not necessarily relying on him as heavily as you otherwise would. And the reason I'm lower on McCoy is for the reasons that you just mentioned. I mean, their offensive line is horrendous. We could probably assume they're going to have one of the worst passing attacks in the league. Yep. And I think that not enough people are thinking about the effect that Tyrod Taylor had on LaShawn McCoy.
Great point.
And then on top of that, the Bills, they get the Ravens, Chargers, and Vikings weeks 1 through 3. And then after that, they get the Packers, Titans, and Texans, 3 defenses that should be far better than what they were last season. Not only that though, but those defenses were at least are able to stop the run at the very least. So I go into a season, I think early season schedules are important, not just because obviously you want plus matchups, but the way that your league mates and the way that you perceive a certain player might change, and you'll start to question whether that player is good or not. I think a good example of that is a Dez Bryant last season, where everyone, obviously we looked at the cornerback matchups and we saw that Dez had a rough weeks 1 through 4, but you still doubt what Dez Bryant is, or you doubt what that player can do. And I think that this is a scenario where we're going to do the exact same thing with LaShawn McCoy. And I fear that we're going to see a situation like we saw with like Todd Gurley a couple of years ago, where he's being fed, he's seeing a ton of work, but he's like that in that mid to RB2 range each week, and he's not really providing the fantasy value that you want him to provide. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, he's 30 years old, and we never know when he's going to break down.
Yeah.
Plus, he was terrible half the season last year. He had 8 games where he was a top 36 running back.
Yeah, it's tough to look at things like that, because like his consistency rankings in terms of what I've seen are pretty in line with what I guess I would have expected. But JJ and I are on the same page here, which I'm going to bring up another player, and I'm sorry to do this because I know it's your turn. But it's the same scenario, and you're higher on this guy than I thought you'd be, and that's Rashad Penny. I know you like Penny from a talent standpoint, but he's playing on a team that seriously appears to be awful. Like, if you take away Russell Wilson, that team is one of the bottom 5 times.
You were about to get killed on Twitter. By the way, at Mike Taglier NFL, if you want to talk to him about him saying the Seahawks are horrible.
Without Russell Wilson, they're a bottom 5 NFL team, and I don't think that's. I don't even think that's exaggerating. They may be the worst team. I don't know, but what I'm saying is, like, you have them at 17 in your rankings. Mm-hmm. Talk me through this. Is like, last year we obviously seen them go with somewhat of a timeshare approach back there, which was really odd. That's not something we usually saw. Chris Carson is getting some hype here. CJ Prosise is the best pass catcher they have. I'm just. Rashad Penny, a lot of people are high on him, so I want to get your take on why you are high on him in the Seattle offense behind, that offensive line there.
Yeah, so first off, I think the offensive line is a little bit better than what consensus thinks. And by that, I mean, maybe they're like 24th best in the league instead of 32nd. I think the Dwayne Brown addition was a big deal. And we even saw that there was an uptick in efficiency on the ground for Seattle when they got Brown. So that's one thing. The other thing, I know that Chris Carson's there, and I think that this ranking in particular can change depending on what happens, in July and August with Chris Carson. But as of right now, I'm going with the assumption that they took Rashad Penny in the first round for a reason. Not only that, they were going to take Rashad Penny at their original spot, they said, where they were before they traded back. So that's another reason why I think that he's going to see a decent workload. And I get the concerns in terms of the surrounding talent, because the surrounding talent's pretty poor. I think Seattle's defense is going to be way worse. Obviously they don't have weapons outside of Doug Baldwin. But I do think that it's a better scenario or situation in general than what LaShawn McCoy is seeing in Buffalo, if we were to make that comparison. So where I'm at, I would say that the biggest difference is probably the way that I view him as a pass catcher versus others. I think that he's able. I think that, obviously the big question mark with Rashad Penny coming out was his pass protection skills. But that to me is more of a coaching thing and decision, as opposed to how that actually impacts him being on the field on third down. Because as we know, it's not like third down backs are constantly pass blocking. They're going out and catching passes.
Yeah, right.
So if we see him be a game changing back in some way, or a really effective running back, I think he's going to see the field. And really, my projections liked him a lot. But as I said, I think that it's one of those situations where if you hear coaches and you see their actions and they're throwing Chris Carson on the field a lot with the first team, that's when, I'll start to knock him down a bit.
The other player I wanted to ask you about here is another rookie, and Tags probably had a heart attack when he saw this. Sony Michel, number 25, JJ.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's another scenario where I'm a Sony Michel guy. That's someone that Tags and I both talked about last time I was on the show. I think Michel is a very talented back, and he's in a situation where people again like to overrate the fluctuation in fantasy production in that New England backfield. I mean, if you look back, they've had essentially a early down back seeing a large number of carries in that backfield in 3 of the last 4 seasons. It's not like this crazy thing where if Sony Michel were to see a high rushing share in that backfield. So to me, again, it's just one of those scenarios where I want to just see how things play out a bit. He's one that easily could move up in my rankings as we approach August.
Yep. Tags, you have any other running backs, man, or want to move on over to wide receivers?
No, yeah, let's talk about some wide receivers, man.
All right, who do you have for us?
All right, so the one player you're high on, I'm low on, like this. So this is a good conversation to have, I guess. Is Adam Thielen. Thielen is someone that I'm concerned about. Losing Pat Shurmur, I think that some are underestimating the loss of him. I don't think that Kirk Cousins would be necessarily known as a check down artist, similar to maybe a Case Keenum would have been. You mentioned that Sam Bradford and Larry Fitzgerald are the perfect combo. I actually agree with you there. I just think Kirk Cousins is someone who's going to end up finding Stephon Diggs, and he's going to like him an awful lot. He's also targeted his tight ends a lot more than the previous quarterbacks there did. So my issue here is that Kirk Cousins has never heavily targeted one wide receiver in his offense. I want to say, looking back through his history, no wide receiver has averaged more than 6.3 targets per game, if I'm not mistaken. It's the reason I was kind of low on Terrell Pryor last year. So coming here, with a new offense, Thielen, Diggs, what has you so high on Thielen? Because you have him at number 9 right now.
I do. And he's one player that I predictably have gone back and forth on a lot. I think it depends on how we see him or how we read the Vikings front office or coaching staff rather. And if they're going to throw him in the slot, at least consistently. I think that if he plays in the slot, that's very, very good for his fantasy potential. My fear is that, what if Kendall Wright ends up winning that gig? That's obviously that's a concern. And that's when I would probably push Thielen down. But I do think that the target distribution in that offense is pretty shallow, I would say. So I can see why someone would maybe prefer Diggs, just given the skill set of Kirk Cousins. But I also do think that if Thielen is in the slot, that's a place that he can win. And that's a place that we have seen Kirk Cousins at least utilize historically, at least, with someone like Jamison Crowder. So that's kind of where my thinking is with Thielen. Obviously, you can look at last season. He had the higher target share between him and Diggs. And like you said, they have a new offensive system potentially and coordinator and whatnot. But that's really the logic behind putting Thielen there. Another guy that has a lot of or could see a lot of movement as we approach August.
Yeah.
Now, this next one surprised me a little bit, and then I went and looked at ECR, and pretty much everyone agrees with JJ. JJ is a little bit lower than them, but Mike Evans is your number 11 wide receiver. ECR has him at number 9. His ADP is number 9. I'm a big believer in Mike Evans, so I just wanted to hear your thoughts to see if I was off on something, JJ.
I'm just going to throw, as you guys know, I'm not a hot take person, but I think Mike Evans is vastly overrated.
Okay.
I understand the correlation and the connection between deep ball targets not being able to produce a lot of yards after the catch, but Mike Evans is consistently far below the norm in terms of where he catches the football and how much yak he produces. And then on top of that, there's just a lot of mouths to feed in that offense. I know a lot of people don't like that argument because good players get the ball, but I don't see Mike Evans as an Antonio Brown or Julio Jones or DeAndre Hopkins type receiver where if you add weapons, their target shares don't move. I think with Mike Evans, his target share can move. We saw his target share move from 2016 to 2017 when they added Deshaun Jackson to the mix and they added another
a ton. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, the difference that we see, we basically have an example of Mike Evans not seeing the same type of volume based on the situation around him. So to me, it's not even necessarily the fact that Ryan Fitzpatrick is quarterbacking that team through the first 3 weeks. I don't think that's an uber significant thing. But I do think that just overall, Mike Evans is just slightly overrated by the fantasy community.
I'm looking at his stats. He went from 173 targets in 2016 to 136. That's a 37 spot drop, man. That is pretty significant. You look at his season last year too. He was the wide receiver number 20.
Yeah, well, he didn't score as much last year.
Problem,
right? There were some touchdown numbers down in Tampa Bay, but you know what's funny, JJ, is for the first 2 years of Mike Evans' career, I said he was overrated, and nobody wanted to listen. They all wanted
the opposite.
And after his sophomore year, I was like, you know what, I got to come around and just say maybe he is better than I thought he was, or whatever. And I had to turn my mind on it. But watching him, I never got the idea that he was a Julio Jones-esque wide receiver. He's just not. He's not physically gifted that way. He's big. He is. And he's got strong hands. I think he's a good red zone threat. But I don't think he's a wide receiver like DeAndre Hopkins, who should be getting 170 targets. So
exactly.
I kind of agree with JJ on this one. I think that
he kind of changed my mind here, and this is why we have these conversations. He's got a 52% catch rate over his career. That's not very impressive.
No. Yeah, I mean, he's been this deep ball guy, or at least his ADOT. He'll get down the field. But again, like I said, his yards after the catch is usually horrendous, at least versus expectation. And when you can see historically these weapons or the change in his situation affect him and his target share, that's when maybe he's not as special as we might think.
I need to cancel all my best ball teams now. Actually, I think I only have 2 shares, but I had Evans pretty high in my rankings. I'm really glad that I asked you about this, JJ. Tex, do you have another wide receiver? I've got two more highlights.
Yeah, I still have Mike Evans inside my top 10, but I actually understand exactly where JJ is coming from. I still think he's going to be fine in best ball, Bobby, for what it's worth, because I think he's a touchdown.
Okay.
That's a good point. He's a guy that could score 12 touchdowns and you wouldn't blink. The one player I want you to talk about, because I'm sick of being blasted for it, is Tyreek Hill. You have him.
Oh my God.
You have him 7 spots lower than the consensus. I'm sick of hearing about Tyreek Hill. I also have him. I think I might even have him lower than you.
I don't think you have him low enough, JJ. You have him at 16. I've got him at 20.
I'm glad that you brought him up.
Yeah, please talk about him.
He is the definition of unsustainable production. What we saw last season. Here's the other thing. Okay. Everyone assumes that what Pat Mahomes, obviously, we talked about him earlier, and obviously I think that Mahomes has upside. But I think that we assume that Pat Mahomes being this big arm guy is all of a sudden better than what they had with Alex Smith. Well, Alex Smith last year was one of the best deep ball passers in the league.
The best.
Yeah, exactly. And so the issue is that you're comparing Alex Smith's historic numbers, right? And then you look at Tyreek Hill's 2017, and that doesn't make any sense because 2017 is when Alex Smith didn't have his historical numbers. He had an outlier season. So with Tyreek Hill, I mean, if you run projections and if you go through the process of running projections, it's very, very difficult to see Tyreek Hill as a top 12 receiver. It's a difficult thing to see. To me, I'm just snagging Sammy Watkins instead because I think Sammy Watkins, if you want to pick one of the two, just go with the cheaper guy because I think Sammy Watkins has just as much upside this season as Tyreek Hill does.
Yeah, I mean, he was drafted in the 3rd, 4th round last year, and nothing changed about who he is. He actually stayed healthy for a full season. That helps him.
I think Sammy Watkins is more talented than Tyreek Hill as an all-around wide receiver, and I'm not shy about saying that. So I am with JJ on this one. I actually
drafted top 5 for a reason.
I just got done writing up a Sammy Watkins profile, so I'm all jacked up on Sammy Watkins. But in reality, the Tyreek Hill thing, I mean, what was the stat the other day, Bobby? JJ, I'm sure you saw it. We're all on Twitter. In terms of
every single touchdown he had was over 20 yards last year.
Yeah, he didn't catch a red zone touchdown last year.
Right.
Like that stuff can't continue, guys. Like the wide receivers in the Andy Reid offense last year saw a combined 44.7% of the target share. That's going to improve, obviously, adding Sammy Watkins, but you're not going to start drastically changing what worked for this offense. Like Travis Kelce, you're not going to take targets away from him. Kareem Hunt's still going to be involved. So the targets are going to spread out.
And I'll say this too. Not only are we mentioning the downside with just general regression, but what if Pat Mahomes sucks?
It's a possibility.
Yeah. Right? Like I like Pat Mahomes, but what if he's not good? Then you're drafting this guy early who's already going to hit regression's already going to hit him, and then his quarterback's bad.
One of the things I put in this profile of Sammy Watkins is that, do you know how many teams, people are projecting them as 2 top 30 wide receivers, a top 2 tight end, and a top 7 running back. Do you know how many teams in the NFL, like all 32 teams last year, had 2 top 30 wide receivers, 1 top 12 tight end, and 1 top 12 running back? 0.
Yeah.
So I lowered the expectations, and it's still 0. You're expecting so much out of a guy that has played 1 game, and that's the thing. I think Mahomes has upside there. I do. That's why I understand people liking him. I wouldn't draft him there because I feel like you're capping yourself, but it's just expecting too much of this offense. And when you look at the players and who can you expect regression out of, Tyreek Hill is the natural one you want to go to.
Yep, I agree. Man, Chris Conley starting this year for the Chiefs. I didn't realize that. That makes me a little bit excited because we're finally going to get to see what he can do. Oh, I don't think it's going to be anything. I'm not drafting. I'm not telling anyone to draft him. Don't.
You need to know this, because you're here, you need to know that Chris Conley and Kevin White are Bobby's boys.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I Brandon Gadula, who works at numberFire, he is a Chris Conley truther like I've never seen before. And it's funny, every week last year. So you remember how the Chiefs started out really hot?
Oh, yeah.
And then they hit that lull in the middle of the season. Well, the splits with and without Chris Conley.
Yep.
Literally lined up exactly. So Brandon each week would just tweet the splits with and without Chris Conley. It was amazing.
Oh, that's so funny.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. Okay, here's one I'm actually really excited about asking you about because I have not heard anybody talk about this guy, and you are the single highest expert on Emmanuel Sanders. You've got him at 25. ECR is 33. His ADP is 37, so you've got 12 spots higher. What do you think about Emmanuel Sanders?
Yeah, I mean, I still see the target distribution being fairly similar in that offense. I know they got young wideouts in the draft, but to me, it's really just looking at where things are going to be funneled. I think Demaryius Thomas is a decent pick, but again, it's like previous seasons where you're sitting there and you're like, well, I can get Emmanuel Sanders later. I might as well just get Emmanuel Sanders. I just see the target distribution being shallow there, similar to I see, like I mentioned with Minnesota. So I think Emmanuel Sanders in a pretty decent spot.
All right, here's the final name I want to ask JJ about for wide receivers. Then we'll move on over to tight ends. And Tags, if you have any wide receivers, obviously we can do that first. But Allen Hurns, wide receiver number 39. I know we've been hearing some whispers that he's the clear-cut receiver in Dallas. Is that why you have him so high?
Yeah, I think that he's going to be the guy, at least to start. I don't mind Allen Hurns talent-wise. And so that's really what it comes down to is when I'm looking that late, I could see a path to him being a week in, week out wide receiver 2 for your squad. So that's really the main reason why I ranked him where I did.
His ECR right now is number 50, and like I said, JJ has him all the way up at number 39, right there ahead of Jordy Nelson. I guess we should probably talk about Jordy Nelson too, number 40.
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea what to do with that Oakland offense right now. That's actually like it's so
yep.
Like it's just a very difficult thing to read because that front office and coaching staff is impossible to read. So I mean, I can see again Jordy Nelson being fine. I worry about older guys changing teams like that, and I'm not a big Derek Carr fan either.
Here, hold on a second. JJ actually has Jordy Nelson ahead of the expert consensus. I thought 40 was really low.
Oh, yeah,
I don't even remember where I have him. So ECR is 42 on Jordy Nelson. ADP is 31. Guys, That tells you everything that you need to know. Other players like that, Will Fuller, ADP 28. You guys are drafting him too high. Experts have him at 37. And every single year we see a bunch of these guys just be absolute duds. We've got over 100 experts that do these rankings. Just listen to them. Like, you've got them in your back pocket.
Yeah, I would take Kenny Stills over Jordy Nelson every draft. But that's just me. Jordy Nelson would be best suited in the slot, but if Martavis Bryant gets suspended,
exactly,
then that's all downhill from there, because then they're going to put in Ryan Switzer.
Then it's Jared Cook season.
Yeah, pretty much.
I like Jared Cook. Cook.
Oh, stop. All right. So, JJ, the last wide receivers I want to ask you about, it's a combination, and I can see why, but I want to know what's leading you to this. So you have Marvin Jones down at 27, but you have Kenny Golladay up at 46. I know you're a big Babytron supporter.
Yes, sir.
And that you started that whole movement. However, is Kenny Golladay should he really be considered like a flex option?
I don't know about a flex option. I think that it's a situation where, if he starts to see more volume, obviously he's going to see it in the outside. And I think that that's going to just impact Marvin Jones naturally. And Marvin Jones might see a little bit regression as well, just in the touchdown column. But I obviously, there is a scenario where Kenny Golladay is very firmly the number 3 option in that offense. He doesn't see a high target share, but even still, again, I keep talking about these, the shallowness of these target distributions. I think that's kind of what we're seeing in Detroit too. There's no tight end there now. Maybe you're a Michael Roberts truther.
Luke Wilson.
Or Luke Wilson. There's no real tight end option in the offense.
They have no one in the red zone except Golladay.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I think that there is upside there, and you're kind of buying into talent and hoping that talent can push aside. Again, I love Marvin Jones too. 2 years ago, I was all about Marvin Jones. Like, I think he's a very talented receiver. I just think that there's this potential that Kenny Golladay could be special. And if that's the case, at the very least, I think that if you look at projections, you start building out projections, it's actually pretty easy to see Kenny Golladay seeing 15% of the team's targets, at its base. And then if you build off of that a little bit and see that the upside's there, that's really why the discrepancy in the rankings are the way that they are.
Fair stuff. Bobby, I want to ask one tight end. I don't know if you have any more wide receivers.
No, I'm good on wide receivers.
All right. So the one that I'm freaking psyched about when I looked at your rankings is Vance McDonald. You have him at 16. I am huge on McDonald this year. I actually think he's someone that you could snag with your final draft pick, and you're going to know what you have after week 1. That's essentially what's going to happen. I think that we're going to learn the preseason what you have. But Vance McDonald, similar to Sammy Watkins, was traded right before the season. The Steelers got him right before the season. He's an athletic freak. Like, he's the type of tight end that can average over 15 yards per reception. And playing in an offense with Antonio Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, and James Washington, Le'Veon Bell, he's never going to be a focal point. And especially when it comes to the red zone. We've seen Heath Miller be fantasy relevant. We've seen Jesse James be fantasy relevant at times. Vance McDonald, I feel like he could be that potential breakout star, and that we see Juju maybe take a little step back in production.
Yeah, I think that it depends on what you want to do at the tight end position when you're drafting. If you want a high floor guy who's not going to get you off the couch when you're watching football, then draft Charles Clay. Just get someone like Charles Clay. But with Vance McDonald, if you there is volume for him to grab in that offense, especially if you don't think that James Washington is going to see any significant volume in year 1, which I think that he'll be involved sooner rather than later, but. Even still, I think there's enough volume to go around. I think that you want to associate your tight ends in fantasy football specifically to good quarterback play. You want to do that for everyone, but tight end's going to be on a week-to-week basis fairly touchdown dependent, because they're not going to see as much volume as what a wide receiver will see. And you can get that with that offense and with Ben Roethlisberger. So I think all of that together and what you just mentioned, Tags, that's really why I have Vance where I have him.
Yeah, and I'll mention that, we've had Martavis Bryant there, Antonio Brown, there's been receivers there before, and each of the last 5 seasons, Steelers have had at least 90 targets go to the tight end position. There was 119 of them in 2016, so definitely like I love James Washington. I think he's so underrated as a receiver. Yeah. But Vance McDonald, there's still a role for him, and I think, and by the way, when you draft him with your last pick, even if you're a streamer, do that, because he plays the Browns in week 1.
Exactly. Yep.
I love Juju, but would it surprise you guys if James Washington outperformed him this season?
I would be surprised.
Okay.
I would probably be surprised. However, it's not like something that I would say like a bet against, because I think James Washington is really freaking good. I like Juju coming into the league too, so I was somewhat high on him. But playing out of the slot, it's going to be much more of a guaranteed role. Yeah. And Antonio Brown dominates the perimeter.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay. Well, I was going to talk to you about Evan Ingram because you've got him as tight end 7. I've got him, I think, tight end 8, and I love that you have him so low. But then I saw that you have O.J. Howard number 23.
Yeah, that was a surprise.
And earlier I mentioned that I love him, and you were probably just sitting there laughing at me. So bring it on. Tell me why I'm wrong here.
No, I mean, look, I think there's a path to O.J. Howard being ranking or finishing way higher than where I have him ranked. I'm just still of the belief that Cameron Brate's going to be the primary pass catcher at tight end in that offense. Do I think that that's logical or what have you? Not necessarily. I mean, I think that if you're going to use the kind of draft capital they used on O.J. Howard, you should freaking play the guy. But I'm still concerned. You know, they signed Cameron Brate. He has a long-term deal now. Cameron Brate has produced. And it's tough to, with all the weapons in that offense, it's tough to see a consistent week in, week out output from someone like O.J. Howard. That's really why I have him ranked where I have him ranked.
Okay. I'm looking at the game logs right here, and if you take O.J. Howard from week 7 on, he was the number, let me see, 3, 4, 5. He was the number 6 tight end, right behind Evan Ingram, Zach Ertz, Jimmy Graham, Travis Kelce, and Rob Gronkowski. He was really good once they finally got him on the field.
Yeah, he was. I also have fear with that tight end, with the tight end position in general, if Chris Godwin becomes something, which I think is possible.
He will.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love Chris Godwin. I love everyone in that Buccaneers wide receiver core, and I love Jameis, too. He was my number 7 receiver before the suspension. Is there any chance that he's going to appeal that and win?
I have no idea, honestly.
They're saying that the camp is saying that they're prepared. They prepared for a 3-game suspension, but with the appeal, they think they can knock it down to 1.
Okay. Yeah, I still don't think I would draft him because I don't want a quarterback sitting on my bench.
Yeah. I think in a single quarterback league, he's mostly undraftable right now.
You know, I love Cameron Brate, too. There's just that whole offense. I think Jameis could throw for 4,500, 4,600 yards. Dags, he was on pace for that, right?
Yeah, he was on pace for 49. Well, if you took the full games that he played, the ones that he didn't leave early, he played 11 full games, but the 16-game pace was 4,911 yards.
JJ, before we let you go, we have a little bit more time, and I just want to ask you, is there one sleeper that you are getting in like every single best ball league right now that you just love?
I don't know I wouldn't say sleeper as much. I just think he's insanely undervalued, and it's Randall Cobb.
Okay.
He's just someone that I seem to gravitate towards all the time when drafting. Obviously, the number 2 option in that offense. You know, I worry about the touchdown upside, but of course, we know that Aaron Rodgers has insane touchdown upside and just in general. So, you know, if he has a 35 to 40 touchdown season, then Randall Cobb's going to get his. I just think that he's undervalued where he's at. I think that you can make the case too. Jamison Crowder's another slot guy who I think is a little bit undervalued right now.
Agree. Yeah.
Yep.
Now, if you were making a bet against Tags for something really embarrassing, who's like one player that you would definitely bet on, like towards the top of the draft?
Just me versus Tags?
Yeah.
I don't know who's. I feel like Tags and I are kind of on the same page with a lot of dudes.
Okay. Yeah. He's going Joe Mixon. I'm trying to decide who to go against here.
Oh wait, hold on. Who? You said you'd take Lamar Miller over Joe Mixon.
At that point in time, yeah, I think I would.
Yeah,
especially if Deontay Foreman's going to be on the pup list.
That's when I jumped. That's why I jumped up and I said, hey, I'll make that bet. I'll take Joe Mixon on that side. So Bobby made the bet, not me.
I did not make the bet. No.
I feel like if Houston had any semblance of an offensive line, Lamar Miller would be in such a good spot. But that line scares the crap out of me.
Yeah, I guess you're probably right about that. I'll probably find someone way better, like Sonny
I was
Michel.
shocked they did not spend more draft equity in the offensive line. Like they didn't attack them in free agency like I thought they would have, and then the draft came and it's like I know they didn't have a first or a second round pick, but like seriously, you guys have got to protect your quarterback.
Yep.
All right, everyone, that's all for today's show. JJ, really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it.
It's our pleasure. And thanks to the sponsors of today's show, pristineauction.com, where you can find incredible values. Make sure to let them know Fantasy Pros sent you. That's PRISTINE. And go to fantasypros.com/contest. That way you can get the details on the signed DeAndre Hopkins jersey giveaway that we're going to be picking at the end of this week. And thanks again to simplecontacts.com/fantasypros. You can get $30 off your contacts at simplecontacts.com/fantasypros. For Mike Tagliere, I'm Bobby Sylvester. Thanks for listening and enjoy your football.
I just wanted you to watch me dissolve.